Thank you for joining us on This Week in Turkey. I am Murat Türsan. Tonight, singer-songwriter Sezen Aksu is under fire by religious conservatives. We'll have Dr. Kenan Sharpe back with us to comment. Turkey misses a deadline to respond to the European Human Rights Court ruling on Osman Kavala. It is the 15th year anniversary of journalist Hrant Dink's murder. We'll have the latest on the economy and regional politics, as well as COVID numbers. Our main story tonight, Sezen Aksu, singer-songwriter, is coming under fire after the song she recorded in 2017 is re-uploaded on the artist's YouTube account. But this is more than just a few comments on Twitter. The artist is now facing a criminal complaint alleging that the lyrics of the song demeans religious values, which constitutes a crime. For those who might be watching us from the West and wondering, how is that a crime exactly? Yes, in Turkey, you cannot make public statements demeaning religious values. And what are these egregious lyrics exactly that are tantamount to inciting a riot? Calling Adam and Eve ignorant. Adam and Eve as in the first two people to ever walk the earth in Abrahamic religions. Why is this offensive? I think this is a good time to bring out the old saying. God knows.
Renowned Turkish singer Sezen Aksu is facing a criminal complaint filed by religious conservatives for lyrics in her 2017 song, Living Something Wonderful. The complaint alleges that the song lyrics include lines that insult religious values. The lyrics of the song had also made headlines back in 2017 when it was released and was later removed due to backlash. However, controversy rises again as the video was re-uploaded on Aksu's YouTube channel 3 weeks ago. The lyrics that caused so much fallout read, "We are following a miracle, heading to the apocalypse. Say hello to that ignorant Adam and Eve," which were seen as derogatory by several conservative movements. Murat Şahin, leader of the National Perpetuity Movement, a religious conservative and pro-government movement, also targeted Aksu. Under Şahin's orders, a group marched in front of Aksu's house in the Beykoz district of Istanbul on Monday. During the march, Şahin made a statement saying, "These so-called artists are competing with one another to insult national and religious values, while they call it art." It wasn't long until the official religious bodies were involved. The Directorate of Religious Affairs released a statement condemning the song, saying that it was belittling to holy figures in Islam. But Sezen Aksu did not stand alone against the barrage of condemnation. Deva Party Chair Ali Babacan came to the singer's defense saying, "Turkey can only develop through freedom of speech and freedom of thought. Our artists must have the freedom of expression. These people who bin her words are only hurting this nation." Fellow artist Ömer Zulfü Livaneli wrote, "They have begun a lynch mob against Sezen Aksu for song lyrics. These people who twist her words don't understand art, literature, or culture. They're looking at art through the narrow lens of politics."
To make sense of it all, back with us on the program, Dr. Kenan Sharpe. Doctor, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here again.
Our pleasure. Now, for the folks at home that might not entirely be familiar with Sezen Aksu and her song, and if they're like me and they're completely pop culture illiterate, they might not be aware of why Sezen Aksu is a big deal and why the song is a big deal and why it has so many conservatives upset. Do you think you could tell us why?
Absolutely. So the funny thing actually is that this song should never have been a big deal. It actually came out about 5 years ago. So what we're seeing is kind of this manufactured outrage because one of the lines in the song says briefly, "Say hello to the ignorant Eve and Adam." So for this line, Sezen Aksu has been accused by certain circles in Turkey of blasphemy because in Islam, Adam and Eve are considered prophets or holy figures. So according to this reasoning, calling them ignorant, quote unquote, is supposedly an insult to religion. And you asked why conservatives are upset about this. You know, I, as a journalist, try my best to be objective, but in this particular situation, I really can't help but feel that, you know, certain people might be looking for a reason to be offended about something. You know, as we know, the state of the economy is not so good at the moment. Politics are a mess. And these moments of outrage kind of feel like an attempt to find an internal enemy of some kind that pushes us back into what feels like a never-ending cultural war. So we have these moments where people, you know, express their outrage, but what it really becomes is this excuse to silence people, whether it's musicians or journalists or human rights activists, etc. But to get to this specific case, this latest fight over Sezen Aksu, on December 30th, Sezen Aksu released a music video for this song, which I mentioned is a few years old. The song is called Şahane bir şeydir yaşamak, or Living is a Wonderful Thing. And it's a song about, as the title suggests, living being this wondrous and strange thing. And it has that single lyric about Adam and Eve. But it seems the trolls didn't notice that lyric when the song came out in 2017, but they came out of the woodwork when Sezen Aksu released the music video a few weeks ago. So first we had a hashtag, Sezen Aksu Know Your Place. And then we had a lawyer in Ankara try to file a complaint against Aksu on the charge of insulting or provoking or degrading religious values, which is actually a part of the Turkish penal code. And there are many cases of intellectuals or artists being tried for denigrating religious values. But it didn't stop there. We had a group of pro-government people, part of a thing called the National Defense Movement, who gathered actually in front of Sezen Aksu's house in Istanbul and staged a protest. And then it didn't stop there either. We had politicians then coming out to attack her, from MPs of the ruling AKP, even an MP from one of the so-called opposition parties, the Memleket Partisi, said that artists need to respect the people's religious and national values. And then the infamous chair of the National Movement Party, the MHP, Devlet Bahçeli, spoke during his party's parliamentary group meeting and said that Sezen Aksu is not a little sparrow, as her nickname in Turkish goes, but is actually a little ignoramus, which is what he called her. So, you asked me, for the folks at home, who is this woman that everyone from the courts to the most high-profile politicians in Turkey are targeting? She's really one of the most legendary musicians in Turkey, Sezen Aksu. When you hear her voice, if you know her songs, you instantly you recognize that voice from its kind of emotive quality and its strength. And she has countless songs that are known by, I think, just about everyone in the country knows at least one of her songs from every social class. And these are the kind of songs people listen to when they fall in love, when they break up, when they dance, when they drink, when they laugh, when they cry. And she's been in the business since the 1970s, and her album sales are still in the millions. Even on online streaming platforms, actually, she's still in the top 5 every year. And she's collaborated with major musicians from all over the world, and really, is one of the most acclaimed musicians in Turkey. So you can imagine then how absurd it feels for people to try to silence a figure like this, because she's someone really whose music has been intertwined with the last 50 years of history and culture in Turkey. And then the situation gets even sadder because even other organizations have gotten involved from the state. So Turkey's Media Watchdog, the Radio and Television Supreme Council, the vice president of this council recently called music channels one by one, telling them that they don't recommend for these channels to play this song by Sezen Aksu, because they could potentially face grave sanctions if they do so, because they would be insulting the country's national and spiritual values. So, this vice chair of the Media Watchdog was careful to say they can't tell them not to play the song, but it would probably be in their best interest if they were careful about not only playing this song, but other ones like them that potentially offend people's spiritual values. But then the funny thing is, just to wrap this up, like, if you actually look at what the lyrics say, it's really a song about how strange and wonderful it is to be alive. And it talks about us going from birth to death on this kind of roller coaster of chance. And on the way, we kind of, wave to Adam and Eve, the first human beings. So instead of really trying to say something offensive about religion, it's talking about what a strange thing life is, that from the beginning of humanity to maybe the end, all of us are sort of confused and don't really know what's going on. And that's part of the wonder of it. So to take this kind of poetic thought about life and turn it into something criminal, really absurd is the only word I can think of.
I see. Now, on to another thing. Now, we spoke earlier and you talked about how pop music often reflects the news cycle. Now, though Sezen Aksu is in the headlines today, this is not an isolated incident. As you mentioned, there have been a growing trend of backlash and criticism against artists in Turkey. So what's going on in popular culture? Are the artists fighting back, and how are they fighting back?
Yeah, they are fighting back, and it can be really interesting to pay attention to what's happening in something that might seem as trivial as pop culture. So we're used to the news cycle, the headlines, the bad news, the geopolitics, the diplomacy, etc. But really, when we look at things like popular culture that don't seem necessarily very profound, it really shows us some of the deeper dynamics that are going on in Turkey. And I think in looking at the art does this, that shows us really what's going on and how people feel about it. But looking at what artists also themselves do in these moments is also really illuminating. So, in this case of Sezen Aksu, people have fought back. Aksu herself has remained silent about this, but major other, musicians or cultural figures or intellectuals have spoken up in defense of her. People like Istanbul Mayor İmamoğlu has spoken up in defense of, creative freedom, etc. And there's been other moments just in the last week where artists have kind of made this stand, and as you said, they try to fight back. And I want to give you another example of this, but I do want to also say that these moments are inspiring, but I also don't want to exaggerate the importance of kind of pop culture figures as opposition heroes. Sezen Aksu is actually a really controversial figure for different reasons. She, for example, supported the AKP's 2010 constitutional referendum that many say really strengthened the AKP's kind of increasing hold over the state and especially the judiciary. And some of these figures who've been active, this week or in previous weeks in Turkey might be vocal on some topics, but not about others. Not all of their actions might match up with what they say. But I do think these moments are important. So to give another example of pop culture kind of illuminating the headlines and what other stuff that's going on, there's the singer Gülşen, who's this 45-year-old singer who's been a really major figure in pop music since the 1990s. And she was performing for fans at a concert a couple weeks ago. But rather than her lyrics, it was actually her stage costume that became the topic of discussion. Some people claim that her clothing was too risque and exposed too much skin. And one of the loudest complainers about Gülşen's stage costumes is a man named İzzet Yıldızhan, who's a kind of middle-aged, mid-tier folk singer who's a bit notorious. And he said that singers like Gülşen go up on stage in what is basically their underwear, and he thinks this is wrong, and that people who are artists in Turkey should be aware of societal values and respect the kind of traditions and morals of the common people. So therefore, coming up on stage in risque clothing is offensive. And very interestingly, he said in a statement, he said, Yıldızhan, "This is not the world, this is Turkey." As if somehow saying this is Turkey excuses all sorts of strange pressures, but also the idea that this is not the world is a kind of interesting slip of the tongue, because the things people like him are saying really are hard to match with our kind of ideas of how our modern world should be. It's also interesting that this man who criticized Gülşen for her immorality is a man who famously was part of a scandal in 2011 involving prostitutes and violence against women at a hotel in Ankara. But anyways, so when Yıldızhan said these things about Gülşen, it created another kind of tempest in a teacup, so to speak, where people are talking about something that really shouldn't matter at all. And in response, Gülşen initially didn't say anything. She went on stage in her next concert in an even more revealing costume that actually really did look like underwear. And people interpreted this as her kind of political response to really strongly growing conservatism in the country, which is often, is expressed over kind of policing women's bodies and what they're able to wear. And with the cases of femicides and rape in this country, we often have this discourse of, if this woman was wearing this, what did she expect, and things like this. So revealing clothing in itself isn't a political gesture, but Gülşen responding to this kind of fake outrage again, wearing whatever she wanted, really was this kind of wonderful moment for people who are in favor of personal freedom and liberty and expression in this country. But then Gülşen went even further, and she actually released a statement yesterday about what she felt about this pressure on her to dress or not dress a certain way. And it was a really intelligently written and strong statement that was more of a manifesto than anything. And what she said there is that there are double standards about women in this country. And they say that if she's a mother, like she is, or if she's a wife, she shouldn't wear clothes like this. But she says in her statement that she's a proud mother and she's a proud wife, but this doesn't limit her to act from any way she would like to act, and that nobody can pressure another person based on their life choices and their preferences. And really powerfully, she says, I may be a mother and I may be a wife, but I am more than these titles or adjectives. I am not the slave, she said in her statement, of any adjective. And I don't belong to anyone. I belong to myself. So this moment of fighting back, as we called it, really made a lot of people feel really excited, who share similar values as her about individual freedom. Because it's really this kind of pushing back against creeping conservatism, which really affects women and other, in particular among other groups.
I see.
Yeah.
And last, real quick, I like to go back to last week a little bit. Last week, we did a story on Enes Kara, a med student residing in a religious sect dormitory who unfortunately took his own life. Now, Tarkan, a very famous singer-songwriter, famous enough that I know who he is, released what I would call a fairly innocuous statement. He urged parents to listen to their kids and that our priority should be to protect children. And Turkish Twitter just exploded. He has been called everything from an enemy of Islam to a Satanist. I don't know how you connect those two ideas, but can you give us a little context as to why something seemingly so benign would cause such an outrage in the conservative community?
Yeah, it's an interesting case because, like you said, the statement Tarkan gave really was benign. After this medical student killed himself, he was saying, yeah, we have to protect children and they shouldn't be pressured. Again, it's the same theme, right? We're seeing this week and last week about individual freedom, that, young people shouldn't be pressured to, or university students to live in a dorm where they have to abide by a certain lifestyle, or they're forced to pray, or there's any kind of pressure on them to be anything than who they are. So it was a very, tame statement in some ways, but it's a really hot topic because some of the discussions after Enes Kara's suicide was about these dorms run by religious brotherhoods. And there's been several cases in the last months and even before about, violence against people living there, or deaths, or even just the social pressures that people who live in these situations have to deal with. And one of the demands for some people in the opposition is to shut down these dorms run by religious brotherhoods. Tarkan didn't go that far. He just said that we need to protect children and we need to protect people, their rights as individuals to live how they want to live and be how they want to be. But the reverse of the conservative outrage against this rather tame statement was the opposition really, really strongly praising Tarkan for saying what they felt needed to be said. And actually, it came in a context where many people in the opposition were really upset with CHP chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, who actually said on Twitter that he would not be commenting on this situation because you shouldn't talk about suicides, the experts say, because it may encourage copycat cases. But many people felt that Kılıçdaroğlu's refusal to comment on this was actually his fear of upsetting conservative voters, that he didn't want to touch this hot topic of these dorms run by religious brotherhoods, so chose not to say anything. So what happened then was this immense outpouring of praise for Tarkan, that some people were saying that, Tarkan is a better politician than Kılıçdaroğlu is. One person made a funny kind of reference to fans' desire for Tarkan to put out a new album, which has been this demand for a long time. He hasn't been putting out new albums. So one person on Twitter, for example, says, if Tarkan's going to do the politics, then let Kılıçdaroğlu put out the album. These kind of funny things that happen in our social media world. But what we really see in these kind of funny instances is actually a real strong discontent with Turkey's main opposition party, the CHP, among certain circles, and a sense that someone like Gülşen, when she stood up for women wearing whatever they want and pushing back on conservatism, or for Tarkan saying something as simple and as innocuous as, young people and children shouldn't be pressured, and we should stand up against, ignorance and bigotry, when even the main political parties are not making statements this clear. There's a sense that the pop stars are the ones people are looking to as their heroes, even though, of course, they're not politicians in the end. And we can't look at them as our saviors. They are expressing something really powerful about how people feel about life in Turkey at the moment.
Dr. Kenan Sharpe, thank you for making sense of it all, and thank you for being able to join us tonight.
Thanks for having me. It was great. It was great being here.
Our pleasure. In other news, time's up. Turkey missed the deadline to provide legal justification for refusing to release Osman Kavala. I say missed, but more accurately ignored. The businessman and philanthropist Osman Kavala has been incarcerated without a conviction since October 2017. Osman Kavala has been charged 3 different times, acquitted twice, and every time he was acquitted, prosecutors came up with fresh charges, everything from terrorism to espionage. Back in 2019, the European Human Rights Court had ruled for Kavala's immediate release, but the ruling had fallen on deaf ears. Turkey was granted until last Wednesday to present justification for the violation of the order. However, the Turkish authorities remained silent, ignoring the deadline. The consequences of this refusal, only time will tell. But what is for certain is that this doesn't spell good news for Turkey's already rocky relationship with Europe and law and order itself. Moving on to domestic news, this week marked the 15th year anniversary of journalist Hrant Dink's death. On January 19, 2007, Dink was assassinated in front of the offices of Agos, the newspaper he founded. Hrant Dink is remembered for many things, but most notably, he was an influential figure for minority rights in Turkey. A Turkish Armenian, he fought for civil rights of Armenians as well as civil rights of other minorities in Turkey. Shortly after the incident, Dink's assassin was apprehended. But controversy and theories surrounding Dink's death never subsided. Many alleged that there was a government involvement or a cover-up. Though no direct ties have been proven, in 2014, the Constitutional Court did rule that the investigation conducted was indeed insufficient. Every year since that day, the Armenian community in Turkey have gathered to honor memory of Dink. This year, the editor-in-chief of Agos, Hrant Dink, spoke to Medyascope.
Wednesday marked the 15th year anniversary of Hrant Dink's assassination, the Turkish-Armenian journalist and founder of the Turkish and Armenian language paper Agos. Hrant Dink was best known for advocating for Turkish-Armenian reconciliation and defending minority rights in Turkey. Dink was prosecuted 3 times for denigrating Turkishness and used to routinely receive death threats, primarily from nationalists. Dink was assassinated 15 years ago on January 18, 2007. He was shot 3 times at point-blank range by Ogun Samast, then a teenager from a village in the Trabzon province. Samast was caught on street surveillance cameras on the day of the shooting. Once his image was released to the public, Samast's father turned him in. Dink's assassination was plagued with speculation of government involvement and conspiracy from the start. Dink family attorney Erdal Doğan alleged that much evidence was destroyed and lost that might reveal relationships between the suspects and law enforcement. During the investigation, 4 prosecutors were dismissed from the case due to having alleged ties with the Gülen movement, the religious sect that was held responsible for the 2016 coup in Turkey. 2 police commissioners, Ramazan Akürek and Ali Fuat Yilmazer, were accused of having prior information of the assassination and withheld it. In 2020, both men were sentenced to prison for illegally wiretapping senior government officials. To date, however, no direct government involvement has been proven in the Dink case. Every year since Dink's assassination, the Armenian community in Turkey has held a day of remembrance. Dink has become a symbol of discrimination and struggle for the Armenian community in Turkey. Hrant Dink, editor-in-chief of Agos, the paper founded by Dink, spoke to Medyascope. The thick curtain hiding Dink's murder has not yet been lifted. I say this with regret. No lesson was learned from Dink's murder. To this day, many people are being targeted by political elite and the political authorities. For 15 years, we still have not been able to prevent the powerful from targeting people who are just minding their own business.
Moving on to the economy, the lira maintains its delicate stability this week as the Central Bank Monetary Policy Board decides to hold fast on interest rates. The latest appointee to the Central Bank presidency, Sharpe had mentioned, in so many words, that this was about all the central bank could do as far as reducing interest rates go. So this week, we are steady at 14%. It's not all good news, however. Treasury deficit is up 9.7%. Spending is up 33%, followed by natural gas prices going up 25% for 2022. And we're not even through the first month of the year yet. Let's go to that story now.
After its rapid and serious decline in the last quarter of 2021, the Turkish economy shows some signs of stability as the lira has been holding steady at around 13.5 against the dollar. And what most economists have been dreading for the past month did not come to fruition yesterday. After the Central Bank's Monetary Policy Board's first meeting of 2022, most breathed a sigh of relief as the board kept interest rates steady at 14%. Since adopting President Erdogan's low interest rate policy, every time the central bank cuts interest rates, it caused an immediate crash in the lira, which was avoided this time. Not all aspects of the economy are as stable, however. The Ministry of Treasury and Finance reports the fiscal year 2021 deficit at 192 billion liras, up 9.7% from last year. The ministry is also reporting 33% higher overhead this year at 1.4 trillion liras. In the supply sector, many consumers found themselves in awe as fuel prices have been steadily increasing despite the lira's relative stability. Consumers who use prepaid natural gas meters and pay for gas in advance complain that they are being billed additional invoices to their usual bill due to the recent price hikes. Natural gas prices for homes are up 25% this year amidst the 2022 round of price hikes by state-owned companies. In addition, yesterday, the government of Iran announced that the flow of natural gas to Turkey would be halted for 10 days due to a technical error, prompting the state-owned distributor Botash to limit the flow to industrial clients.
In foreign relations, Turkey embraces its newfound self-appointed role as a regional peacemaker. As tensions on the Russo-Ukrainian border rise, President Erdogan proposes Turkey to act as an arbiter in bilateral negotiations in an effort to calm the tensions down. Depending on how you look at it, Turkey is either the best or the worst candidate for the job with absolutely no middle ground. Turkey is both an arms supplier to Ukraine and a purchaser from Russia, with relations between the two countries being highly compartmentalized. But it doesn't stop there. Israeli President Isaac Herzog is reportedly invited Turkey to meet with President Erdogan, and Turkey again offers arbitration services to Serbia this week, continuing its newfound role as the peacemaker.
As the Russian-Ukrainian border heats up, Turkey attempts to intervene in the rising tensions. As a previous defense supplier to the Ukraine and a purchaser from Russia, Turkey takes a highly compartmentalized approach to relations between the two countries. Turkey has previously sold Bayraktar TB2 unmanned combat air vehicles to the Ukraine and bought S-400 air defense batteries from Russia, but now attempts to quell the flames. Turkey has offered to serve as an arbiter in the bilateral negotiations for disarmament on the Russian-Ukrainian border, which came up in Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov's press release on Tuesday. President Erdogan is set to visit the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky next month, and expects to have a phone call with President Putin prior to a face-to-face. Turkey's newfound regional peacemaker role doesn't stop there, however. Following a decade-long drift between the two states, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu called Minister Yair Lipid on Thursday, marking it the first call between them in 13 years. In addition, Israeli President Isaac Herzog is reportedly invited to Turkey to meet with President Erdogan. Though there are no solid plans at the moment, it is considered by many as a step in the direction of normalizing relations with powers in the region such as Egypt, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. Serbian President Alexander Vučić and Erdogan also met in Ankara on Tuesday, Turkey again acting as an arbiter to the crisis in Bosnia, where the Serbian hardliners have passed a motion to withdraw from Bosnian institutions.
In coronavirus news, the health ministry is reporting 84% of the adult population fully vaccinated with 2 shots, and 92% have gotten at least 1 dose. The ministry is currently reporting 140 million total doses administered effective as of Thursday. The ministry is also reporting 2.7 million tests, 367,000 cases, 8,000 serious cases, and 1,027 deaths between 1st and 7th of January. The ministry is also reporting 4% pneumonia, 54% bed occupancy, 69% ICU occupancy, and 28.7% of ventilators in use. Now, folks, we don't usually do opinion pieces on the show, but this one seemed apropos. I know that most people have kind of had it with the pandemic, and it's not really a mystery why. Most of us have, and most of us, it's really a thing of the past. Now, why am I talking about this? The more astute of you perhaps might have noticed that today the camera angle is a little off. The lighting is subpar. We are not airing on our usual time, and we are not presenting our usual broadcast standards. That's because our entire control room staff is out, as they have come in contact with an active case. We made do today, mostly by jerry-rigging a few things together, and everyone here is vaccinated, and, we're not exactly saving lives here, so what's the harm? But I put to you, what if we were? What if the control room staff were hospital staff, firefighters, police, people we depend on to get us through tough situations? What if those institutions that we depend on were to be short-staffed or unstaffed altogether? Now, I am in no position to be giving anyone health advice. I am not a scientist. I'm certainly not a medical professional. I could hardly be called an expert on much of anything. So I will refrain from getting in over my head. This is simply me thinking out loud and saying, I think perhaps we should continue to take the pandemic seriously just a little while longer. With that said, that's it for us in This Week in Turkey. I have Murat, Türsan, and thank you for joining us.
Türkiye'nin sivil, bağımsız, özgür ve çoğulcu bir medya ortamına ihtiyacı var. Medyascope 20 Ağustos 2015'te bu ihtiyacı karşılamak üzere yola çıktı. Ama yolumuz uzun. Bu yolculukta bize Patreon veya YouTube'un katıl butonu üzerinden katkıda bulunabilirsiniz. Destek verin, sizinle güçlenelim.